Hi, it's Dennis Daly. Remember Hands Across America? Well, UPI Radio, for which I was working at the time, did some pretty extensive coverage. And here from the archives are Hands Across America reports and hourly newscasts from that day. So let's go back now and see what radio was like the day we held hands across America.
3 hours to go before millions of Americans join hands. UPI Radio News, I'm Ed Cairns in Battery Park, New York. This is Hands Across America Day, and there are still several hours to go before the big event when millions of Americans all across the nation link hands in support of the nation's hungry and homeless. Hands Across America spokesman Maury Goodman is with us now. And Maury, how are things shaping up?
Well, so far here at Battery Park, we've been here for 6 hours. Everything seems to be working smoothly. I don't want to jinx it by saying that, but so far everything's great here. We've heard reports from different parts in the line around the country that they're basically in as good a shape as we are. We got the sun out. It's a beautiful day right now. I just hope it's like that all across the country.
Right. You could hardly have asked for a more beautiful day for Hands Across America. This is Ed Cairns in Battery Park in New York.
And this is Vicki Barker at the White House, where President and Mrs. Reagan later today plan to join Hands Across America. But if you're speeding toward Washington, hoping to hold hands with the President of the United States, slow down. The Reagans will be separated from the rest of us by the usual array of iron fences, concrete barriers, Secret Servicemen, and bomb-sniffing dogs. Their part of the line will be padded with top aides, friends, and White House staff. Now, with more UPI Radio News, here's Sophia Manos.
It's still raining in Indianapolis, although the torrents have given way to drizzle. The start of the Indy 500 has been delayed at least 2 hours. There's still a possibility the race will be postponed. It was to have started an hour ago. A French-language newspaper in Beirut, Lebanon, says 4 of at least 9 French hostages are being prepared for release. There's no independent confirmation of the report, which quotes a reliable source with ties to Syria. The report does coincide with the arrival of a French envoy in Damascus. Yesterday, 2 pro-Syrian publications said some of the American and French hostages in Lebanon are expected to be freed soon. Britain's Prime Minister Thatcher is in the second of a 3-day trip to Israel. Margaret Thatcher and her Israeli counterpart are expected to solidify their commitment to fighting international terrorism. You're listening to UPI Radio News. Television watchers who own satellite dishes are closely watching developing legislation on Capitol Hill. UPI Radio's Ty Chamberlain explains what's happening.
Broadcasters are scrambling the signal they send over space satellites. Within 2 years, just about all such signals are expected to be scrambled. That is, coded, so you can't see them without a decoder costing several $100s. Senators, especially from rural areas, including Bumpers of Arkansas and Ford of Kentucky, want at a minimum to fix it so that decoders are standard, so you never need more than one per TV set. The broadcasters complain that a standard black box would make it easier to decode or unscramble the signal without paying. The senators counter with a plan to build into the decoder price a little money to compensate for that problem. Ty Chamberlain, Capitol Hill.
A published report says a prominent Jewish leader believes U.S. officials plan to block the appointment of an East German official as UN commissioner because he was a Nazi party member. The story about Herman Klenner in the New York Times. A U.S. bone marrow expert is back in Moscow resuming the treatment of Chernobyl nuclear accident victims. Dr. Robert Gale issued no formal arrival statement. He did say he was on his way to meet with Soviet colleagues and is eager to return to work on the 35 people critically injured. The official death toll from the April 26th disaster is 17. That toll is expected to climb. Fort Worth, Texas residents are recovering from a killer storm. Paul Chambers reports.
Cleanup begins today in Fort Worth, where the weather is being blamed for a total of 6 deaths so far. One official says 4 people died from cardiac arrest that was attributed to trauma from the storm. A mother and child drowned when their car was submerged on the city's north side. Trees were uprooted and windows blown out all over the city. Fire officials say that at one time, winds from the severe storm were clocked at 75 miles an hour. Officials say they're lucky there wasn't a greater loss of life. 4 drowning deaths were reported 2 weekends ago when similar weather moved through the city. Paul Chambers, Dallas.
The Communications Workers of America warn they're not issuing idle threats of a strike against AT&T. A 3-year contract expires Saturday. The union says it has the rank-and-file support to walk out if asked. The issues include wages and job security. The union is basing its demands on AT&T's $1.5 billion in profits last year. Sophia Manos, UPI Radio News.
This is the UPI Radio Network. Affiliates Dennis Daly here, preparing to voice this, the first of our 2-minute updates on Hands Across America, beginning at straight up 12:30. The broadcast starts 15 seconds from Mark. We'll give you a 10-second cue and then silence. 10 seconds from Mark. Hands Across America, a special report on the UPI Radio Network. I'm Dennis Daly. Organizers are calling it the biggest event in the history of the world. Millions of people gathering together to raise money for America's homeless and America's starving. We'll be following the event throughout the afternoon on this UPI Radio Network station. First, let's go to one end of that human chain, to Los Angeles, where UPI Radio's Bob Fuss is standing by.
Dennis, it's a beautiful sunny morning here in Long Beach, California, where the western end of the Hands Across America line hits the Pacific Ocean. The spot where the last person will stand is just in front of me, off the bow of the Queen Mary, which now is a hotel and tourist attraction. The person who will be the last in line here in the west has not yet been announced. We're expecting to find that out soon. People are just starting to gather here. By the time the line is to form, thousands of people will be here, including a number of bands and a children's choir. There's also a national clearinghouse for information on how things are going along the rest of the line. For a look at how things are going on the eastern end, we go to Ed Cairns at Battery Park in New York.
Well, thank you, Bob. Hands Across America really lucked out as far as the weather in New York is concerned. It is beautiful. Blue skies, lazy white clouds, and bright sun, making the Statue of Liberty's new torch sparkle in the harbor. When the line is formed here at Battery Park, 6-year-old Amy Sherwood will be in the first place. The Brooklyn youngster's family had been homeless and living in shelters and a welfare hotel. Also in the line, New York Governor Mario Cuomo, Mayor Edward Koch, Cardinal John O'Connor, Harry Belafonte, and many, many more. This is Ed Cairns in New York, and now to Vicki Barker at the White House.
Thank you, Ed. Here at the White House, workmen have erected a huge bleacher to give the press a ringside view of the Reagans' participation in Hands Across America. Unfortunately, that's going to block the view of people standing outside the White House gate. Daughter Maureen and her husband will be here. White House aides don't know yet if there will be other relatives or cabinet officials as well. Outside the gate, organizers are expecting a minimum of 3,000 to 4,000 people around the White House alone, and they can't say how many folks will decide to drop in at the last minute. Now, back to Dennis Daly.
Thank you, Vicki. Of course, in many parts of the country, that chain will be broken. It's an impossibility to cover much of the nation. We'll keep you posted throughout the day on this UPI Radio Network station. Hands Across America, a special report. I'm Dennis Daly reporting on the UPI Radio Network.
Hello, stations. Coming up is your hourly newscast, anchored by Sophia Manos. It begins 15 seconds from the start of the tone. America prepares to open its heart to the homeless. UPI Radio News. I'm Sophia Manos. Millions of people are ready to participate in the colossal attempt to span the United States with a human chain. We have 3 reports. First, UPI Radio's Don Rollins in New York.
We're 2 hours away from link-up time here at the southern tip of Manhattan Island, but the crowds are already forming. The other birds are showing a commitment to the goals of helping the homeless.
I come down to New York often, and I see how some of the people live, and it's unfortunate, and that every helping hand could help the cause.
We heard about it on the radio and when they had the USA for Africa and everything. So this way at least we'll be helping our people.
The eastern end of the line begins at New York Harbor in view of the Statue of Liberty. Over 100,000 New Yorkers will be taking part. Now over to the West Coast, UPI Radio's Bob Fuss.
Good morning. It's bright, sunny, and warm in Long Beach, California, where the Hands Across America line will have its western terminus. The last person will stand at the bow of the Queen Mary, while in the parking lot, some 6,000 people are using balloons to form a Hands Across America insignia visible from the air. Officials here say the line's forming up well around the country with good weather just about everywhere. They report carloads of people driving from Colorado to stand in New Mexico and several weddings underway in the line in Indiana. All here's in readiness. Let's check now with Vicki Barker at the White House.
Didn't buy a ticket but still want to join Hands Across America? Organizer Roger Thiel says latecomers are welcome.
Anyone who wants to come out and be part of Hands Across America is welcome. And while there are certain reserved places in line, anyone who may wish to come is welcome.
Thiel's in charge of the line around the White House. He says he's expecting a minimum of 3,000 to 4,000 people in his segment alone. I'm Vicki Barker at the White House. Back to you, Sophia.
The Indianapolis 500 is now 2 hours late due to rain. The race is still scheduled for this afternoon, but there is a very slight possibility the Indy 500 will be postponed. Efforts are now underway to dry the track. You're listening to UPI Radio News. UPI Radio's Pi Chamberlain reports President Reagan still lacks Senate votes for a Saudi arms sale.
Only needs 34 votes, 1/3 of the Senate plus one. That's what it takes to sustain a veto, in this case, the veto of the resolution of disapproval of the sale. The administration expected to get 34 votes easily for a $350 million sale to the Saudis, but it found that it was way short. To make it more palatable, the most controversial weapons, the Stinger handheld anti-aircraft missiles, were removed. That still did not produce the votes. Senate leaders said that if the vote had not been delayed for 2 weeks, the president would have lost it in one of his most serious foreign policy setbacks in Congress to date. Pi Chamberlain, Capitol Hill.
In Seattle, opening arguments are set for Tuesday in the trial of a jobless steel worker accused of a quadruple slaying Christmas Eve. Police allege David Rice attacked attorney Charles Goldmark and his family in a case of mistaken identity, thinking Goldmark was a communist and a Jew. A fatal air incident in Britain. UPI Radio's Carol Brooks explains what happened.
Two Royal Air Force planes collided in flight during a show at the American Air Base at Mildenhall, England. The two jets, a Vampire and a Meteor, collided during a close formation maneuver at the annual air show. The two flyers in the Vampire jet died when it crashed to the ground. The two Meteor flyers managed to eject and parachute to safety. David Clark lives near the airbase and was out in his backyard when the accident happened.
I was just working away and I heard a bang and I just looked up. And then I thought, my God, that's going to crash. And I stood there and I froze to the ground and it climbed for about 2 seconds. And then immediately it plummeted to the ground and there was an explosion.
Officials have refused to comment on the cause of the collision. Carol Brooks, London.
Residents of Fort Worth, Texas are recovering from a killer storm battering the area with hail the size of softballs. At least 7 deaths are attributed to the weather. Another 19 people were injured at a bowling alley where the hail caused the roof to collapse and shattered windows. U.S. bone marrow expert Robert Gale is back in Moscow to treat 35 people critically injured in last month's Chernobyl nuclear accident. The UCLA physician was the first American to travel to the Soviet Union after the disaster, killing 17 people. Gale says as many as 200,000 will have to be checked for diseases related to radiation for the rest of their lives. And recapping our top story, Hands Across America begins in 2 hours. Sophia Manos, UPI Radio News.
This is the UPI Radio Network. Dennis Daly here, preparing to voice this, your second approximately 2-minute update on the Hands Across America. Coming your way following the tone, 15 seconds from Mark. We'll give you a 10-second cue and then no audio on the line until 1:30. 10 seconds, Mark. Hands Across America, a special report on the UPI Radio Network. I'm Dennis Daly as we continue to cover millions of people getting in line to raise money for the homeless. Let's go now live to UPI Radio's Bob Brill, standing by in Long Beach, California.
Dennis, with a light ocean breeze blowing into Long Beach Harbor, it has to be one of the most beautiful days of the year in Southern California. And for Marty Rogel, head of USA for Africa, he's happy it's finally here.
Actually, it's unbelievable. I was driving in and walked into the front door and just hit me, and the excitement just is overwhelming here right now.
Couple of notes. The name of the last first person in line is being withheld until the last first moment. And Vicki McClure, the young lady who made headlines by singing Reach Out and Touch at the Olympics, will do the same here at some point. The first people on the line are in Hazen, Arkansas, where they camped out on Saturday night after traveling 300 miles from Harrison, Arkansas. And in Arizona, the temperature at 7:20 local time was already in the mid-70s. The mercury expected to hit 100 degrees there for desert dwellers. Dennis?
Thanks, Bob. On down to the city of brotherly love, and Tom McDonald standing by in Philadelphia.
Dennis, it's a beautiful sunny day here in Philadelphia, and organizers are expecting over 150,000 people to turn out in the state of Pennsylvania alone. Philadelphia is the host of one of the most historic miles in the chain, with the line stretching past the Liberty Bell and Independence Hall. Among notables in Philadelphia will be singer Dionne Warwick, Philadelphia Mayor Wilson Goode, and Pennsylvania Governor Richard Thornburg. Well, the line marshals have just received their final instructions in a City Hall briefing, and people are beginning to gather, turning the center city streets into one giant block party, a party that is expected to raise $5 million in this state alone. Dennis?
Thank you, Tom McDonald in Philadelphia. On to Battery Park in New York City, and UPI Radio's Ed Karen.
Thank you, Dennis. Here in Battery Park, Hands Across America organizers say that as far as the line is concerned, there are no celebrities, that everyone is equal. Nevertheless, there are many well-known figures taking part, among them actor Edward Olmos, who plays the lieutenant on Miami Vice.
There's over 3 million homeless and hungry here in the United States, and I think it's just, again, another way of expressing our concern for a major problem.
Organizers say Hands Across America is already a success, that it has made people aware of the plight of the homeless and hungry. This is Ed Cairns in New York. Now to Vicki Barker at the White House.
In just about 90 minutes now, Hands Across America is going to reach past the concrete barriers, past the guard dogs, and through the iron gates of the White House to touch the President of the United States. Outside the White House gate is Lafayette Park, where, winter and summer, the homeless congregate. A little while ago, I was told some of them may join the line as well. Vicki Barker at the White House.
Thank you, Vicki. The weather holding across most of the country, except in the Midwest. Witness what's happening at the Indianapolis 500. Hands Across America, a special report. I'm Dennis Daly on the UPI Radio Network. Affiliates, this is the UPI Radio Network. Dennis Daly here, preparing to voice this update. Coming your way at 2:30 following the tone, Eastern Daylight Time, 15 from Mark. We'll give you a 10-second cue and then silence on the line. The broadcast 10 from Mark. Hands Across America, a special report on the UPI Radio Network. I'm Dennis Daly. On a weekend normally spent at cemeteries remembering war dead or watching cars at Indy, this Memorial Day weekend, millions are gathering to take part in what may be the biggest one-time event in the history of the world, to raise money for this country's hungry and homeless. Let's hopscotch around the country less than half an hour before the magic moment. First to UPI Radio's Ed Cairns in New York.
Thank you, Dennis. With only a half hour to go before millions of Americans give one another a hand, literally, excitement is building here in Battery Park. The line is beginning to form, young and old, black and white, ordinary people and celebrities. The first one in line is 6-year-old Amy Sherwood from Brooklyn. I asked Amy how she felt.
I feel very nice being the first one online.
Amy will be standing right next to her mother. This is Ed Cairns in New York, and now we go to Vicki Barker at the White House.
Thanks, Ed. So far, turnout at some of the main staging points for the Hands Across America ceremony here is low, very low. But the side streets around the White House and the ellipse just off the Washington Mall are starting to fill up. And organizers say they're hopeful they'll have no problem circling the White House and Washington monuments. And now here's Bob Fuss aboard the Queen Mary in Long Beach, California.
Organizers are saving a bit of mystery here at the western end of the line, not saying exactly who will be the last person in line. That person will stand next to a mooring that holds a rope from the Queen Mary in Long Beach Harbor. Just up the way, a band is playing. Several thousand people are gathered for a big party. There's also a huge pile of groceries donated by local stores that will be directly distributed to hungry people. There are boats in the harbor, helicopters, and a blimp overhead, and the line forming up. The line was supposed to go through a major league ballpark during a baseball game, but John Duffy in Pittsburgh reports plans have changed a little.
Ceremonies got underway early here at Three River Stadium. About 20 minutes before today's game between the Cincinnati Reds and Pittsburgh Pirates, approximately 150 Little Leaguers formed a symbolic line across the outfield. Later on today, the human chain for America's homeless and hungry will wind through the stadium with participants standing on top of the dugouts. There were earlier plans to stand across the field during the game, causing the game to stop, but that plan was nixed by Cincinnati Red management. Regardless, all concerned with Hands Across America are happy that it and baseball will be joined together this afternoon. John Duffy, Pittsburgh.
Thank you, John. For the most part, the weather good across most of the nation, with few exceptions. Here's Paul Fike with the National Weather Service in Kansas City.
Most of the nation along the route is dry with temperatures in the 70s and 80s. There are a few scattered rain showers over parts of the lower Ohio Valley, and we had some thunderstorms develop in eastern Arkansas and western Tennessee, with some strong thunderstorms developing in northwest Texas at the present time. Another area of concern along the line is in the southwest, where temperatures across southern and western Arizona, southern Nevada, and Southeast California have already climbed into the 90s, and they're headed for a high of between 95 and 110 degrees across that area this afternoon.
And with less than 30 minutes to go, everyone's getting ready. Hands Across America, a special report. I'm Dennis Daly on the UPI Radio Network. This is the UPI Radio Network. Dennis Daly here, preparing to voice this newscast coming up. An extended newscast will attempt to give you all your cues. Hands Across America. This is Dennis Daly reporting on the UPI Radio Network. In less than a minute, the magic moment will have arrived. Let's go to New York City, where UPI Radio's Don Rollins and Ed Cairns are standing by, and we understand, gentlemen, you had a brief power failure.
Yes, the best laid plans of Mice and Radio Network do go astray. Don Rollins in New York. As you said, we did have a power failure. We're operating on batteries just to make sure the power has been restored, so we'll be on whether or not the power stays on to play the music here. Organizer Ken Cragen is getting ready to officially signal the start of Hands Across America's coast-to-coast connection. Millions of people are holding hands in 16 states and the nation's capital, the District of Columbia. Here at the edge of New York Harbor, there are thousands holding hands, ready for the go-ahead. They're doing the countdown right now.
10, 9, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go!
Everybody hold hands. Balloons by the hundreds are being released here. Just a few minutes ago, we had a fireboat shooting streams of water in New York Harbor.
And gentlemen, on the other side of the country, Long Beach, California, Bob Brill and Bob Fuss.
They're holding hands out here in Long Beach. There are thousands of people running right out to the end of the dock where the Queen Mary is. They're all holding hands at the very end of the line, a family from a local shelter holding their children, people beginning to sway back and forth to the music.
And amid all of this, of course, an effort to raise money, hopefully $100 million, at least $50 million, to help feed the hungry and provide places to stay for the homeless in this country. Hands Across America, the long-awaited moment has arrived. Dennis Daly and the rest of the UPI Radio Network bringing you coverage from UPI Radio. Let's go back down to Long Beach, California, Bob.
Here at the end of the line, the final people in line are Bill and Mary Jones and their 5 children. They are a family that's been in the family shelter for the homeless here in Long Beach. They're standing up on a mooring to which is attached a rope from the Queen Mary. It's really an amazing sight. There are at least a dozen helicopters, a blimp directly overhead, thousands of red, white, and blue balloons. People are standing here at the end of the line, waving little American flags, swaying back and forth. There are a lot of children up on people's shoulders. People are holding a big banner with handprints in front of them. It's truly working well at this end. The very end there's a lot more than one person. It's not a single file line. It looks to me like there are maybe 10 or 12 people at each spot along the very end here. And people are actually continuing right past where the end of the line is and swaying back and forth there. Let's go back to Dennis Daly.
And in big towns and small across America, families, individuals, parties, wedding receptions, the first family taking part. Let's go down to the White House where UPI Radio's Vicki Barker is standing by.
Thanks, Dennis. You know, every now and then you just see some sights that just give you chills, and this is one of them. Here at the White House, President Reagan, Mrs. Reagan holding hands with some children. I see Maureen Reagan standing in front of the White House, also holding hands with children. There's a man in a wheelchair. They're all singing. On the other side of the White House gate, homeless activist Mitch Snyder had brought some of the homeless as well to join the line. Mr. Reagan and Mr. Snyder are not always on the same side of an issue. This one time they're at least holding hands symbolically and literally. Dennis?
A beautiful day in the nation's capital, but in some parts of the country the weather creating a problem. Let's go down to George Tanner, who's standing by in Phoenix.
Well, Dennis, we have a lot of people taking part here. 94-degree temperatures, bright sunshine, dry desert heat, about 10% humidity. Interesting aspect, singer Robert Goulet, about 60 miles west of the city. He has joined hands, and now he is being airlifted by helicopter to a location in the middle of the desert. He'll then join hands with another person airlifted from near the California border. There they are symbolically filling a planned 94-mile gap. They did that because of lack of medical facilities and the desert heat. Dennis?
You're listening to UPI Radio News. Back down to Long Beach, California, Bob Fuss and Bob Brill. Gentlemen?
There are a lot of celebrities here at the end of the line, among them actor Peter Strauss, Whoopi Goldberg, Raquel Welch, Donny Osmond, Dudley Moore, and Ben Vereen. They're joining in, singing, along with the rest of the people on this line. It's a little bit chaotic here at the very end. A lot of people have rushed right in to kind of join. It's a little hard to tell the exact end of the line because everyone is kind of bunched around at this point. People, as you hear, are singing We Are the World. They're going to go to Hands Across America is going to be their next song. Most of the people here are wearing T-shirts which say Hands Across America on one side, The Last Mile on the other side. Dennis?
Thank you, Bob. And back now to Battery Park, where it all started in New York City. Gentlemen?
Well, Dennis, it's an exciting sight here. Thousands of people all joining hands, taking part in this marvelous event. Just offshore, there is a fireboat sending up streams of red, white, and blue water. And behind the fireboat, we can see Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty. In the line itself, I can spot New York Governor Mario Cuomo, Cardinal John O'Connor, Senator Alphonse D'Amato, and New York Mayor Edward Koch. At the very beginning of the line, cute little 6-year-old Amy Sherwood. She's standing holding hands to her mother. It's a beautiful location here on the lower end of Manhattan with the New York skyline on our right and the harbor on our left, and all around it is thousands and thousands of people taking part in this wonderful event. Now back to you, Dennis, in Washington.
Thank you, gentlemen. UPI Radio's John Watkins is standing by. John, by necessity, there are some gaps. I had the occasion yesterday of looking down from a jet plane on much of the area, and I thought at the time there's no way you can get that many hands together. What are inventive Americans doing to fill those gaps?
Well, there's some people working hard in some unusual ways, Dennis, to make sure this chain goes as unbroken as much as possible. For example, in Maryland, just outside Baltimore, scuba divers put on their wetsuits to make the line cross a wide span of the Susquehanna River. In New Mexico, 40 hot air balloons spanned a mile-long gap. And if you've ever wondered where the midpoint for this 4,125-mile-long chain is, it's a toss-up. Some say it's Ripley, Tennessee. Others say it's where the chain turns southwest and crosses the Mississippi River at Memphis.
Thank you, John. Well, at least amid all the hoopla today, millions standing hand in hand, all the media coverage, there are weddings and parties along the way. There comes the realization that the job of feeding America's hungry and helping the homeless is still a very big one, something that one day's promotion is not going to instantly fix. Some of us participating in the event are sharing in the party atmosphere, possibly with a soft drink, some hot dogs, or a little bubbly. But for millions, our picnic lunch seems very much like a feast. UPI Radio's Vicki Barker devoted her weekly roundtable program to the plight of the hungry. Here's a short clip from that. Vicki shares with us today the story of a man who is literally on the street.
Well, I lost my home in the Midwest, and I just wandered around from city to city in my car, trying to find another place to live, and stop and work and get started again.
This man asked that his name not be used. His life fell apart when his safety net disappeared and he could no longer live on odd jobs.
I went broke in Indiana and sold my car, and then that money went in Georgia.
You say that you lost your house in the Midwest. When was that, and what happened?
Well, I was living with my family, and they passed away.
And you've been in this shelter about 6 weeks?
6 weeks, yeah. The main problem for someone who gets in trouble, for the drifting man, is that once you're on the road, you can't get off of it, you see. So with a situation like this, you can, you know. If you don't have that, you just wander from city to city hitchhiking, you know, if you get broke. And you just, as the old hobos used to say it, you know, you can't set up anywhere, you see. And so this way you can possibly do that, you know.
Sounds like it must have been a terrific strain.
Oh, it's terrible. There's nothing worse than being broken on the road. There's nothing worse than that.
But how do you live?
You ride with truckers, and they maybe feed you. You just wander around, you know. And you learn when you hitchhike, as I have across the country, you learn that you only need to eat. A human being only needs to eat about every 2 days, you know. But it's very, very bad, and stop at missions and eat a little, you know, things like that. And you wander around city to city. It's very dull. It's very unhealthy. So it's not a very good thing to do. Best to work.
It best to work, he says, and he has found part-time work here in Washington. When he saved up enough money, he says he wants to move out of the shelter into a rented room. That was the goal of all three of the homeless people who spoke on UPI Roundtable this week, but for some, that goal seems an impossible dream. Dennis?
Thank you, Vicki. As I mentioned, amid all the hoopla, it's easy to forget exactly what Hands Across America is about. Let's go back to Bob Brill and Bob Fuss in Long Beach by the Queen Mary. And gentlemen, you've had a chance to talk to a great deal of people standing in line. Do they really know why they're there?
Well, this is Bob Fuss. I think a lot of them do. As you can hear in the background, they switched songs now, and now they're singing Hands Across America. There's a very visible sign here of what this is all about. Just a short ways away from the end of the line, there's a giant pile of groceries. It's quite high and a really large pile of groceries given by a number of supermarkets in the area, and that's food that will be given out quite directly. The people who are running the money here, and they do hope to raise $50 to $100 million, are the same people who put together USA for Africa, which was, of course, a very successful fundraising effort to raise money to feed the hungry in Africa. They say that they're going to try to get very directly this money quickly out to the people who need it. And one method they'll be using is going to establish charities, people who already have shelters, people who already have facilities set up. In fact, the same person who ran the distribution and continues to run it for USA for Africa is the one who's going to do it here. A lot of the people on the line here continue to wave their hands and smile. A lot of them don't know all the words to Hands Across America, and that's not that surprising. It's a fairly new song. After this song ends, they're going to sing America the Beautiful, and I think a lot more of them will be able to join in on that one. Now back to Dennis Bailey.
Thanks, Bob Fuss. We are going to the major urban areas in this country where the population would seem to be, but there are a great number of people in rural areas. Hagerstown, Maryland is in the Maryland Mountains on Old Highway 40, an almost abandoned stretch of highway. I called the motel lodge there called Deer Park Lodge. Got a gentleman named Jim Malloy on the phone who's sweeping up after last night. He said that they would have been able to provide some services had they only known about the event sooner.
Planned on having the bar open and, maybe having people come in and use the restroom facilities. As it is, it's hard for them to do that right now because we had no, plans of them coming by here.
Apparently, a lot of cities face the same thing, only finding out in the last 5 or 6 days exactly where the route was going to be. Many people disappointed, feeling they could have gotten more friends out and had more good, positive things going on. At least in that part of the country, though, weather is not a problem.
It's beautiful. It's not really sunny. It's nice and cool. It's a nice day to have something like this.
Jim Malloy from the Deer Park Lodge just outside of Hagerstown, Maryland, one of the many rural people in this country taking part in Hands Across America. From rural to very, very urban, Battery Park in New York, and back to Ed Cairns and Don Rump.
Outpouring of love and concern.
Cairns, I think they're going to sing Hands Across America any moment now. Someone dressed as the Statue of Liberty just passed by us, made its way or made her way or his way, whichever, in between the crowd of people. Ken Cragen is the man behind this event, and he says the line from Battery Park at the lowest tip of Manhattan right up to the George Washington Bridge, miles uptown, is unbroken. He said that there are not only the line is not only unbroken, but that there are 2 and 3 deep. I spoke with Cragen a few minutes ago, and he said the most important part of the event is making people aware of the plight of America's hungry and homeless.
I think that's the most important thing we're accomplishing is the focus on the issues of hunger and homelessness. It doesn't matter whether this line connects or not, because the most important thing is that it connects with the issues of hunger and homelessness in this country, and that all of us connect with those issues, and that we do something about it. And this line is going to be connected in spirit for sure, whether or not it connects completely across the country.
Now we're going to go up to the stage where organizers of Hands Across America are now speaking. Well, actually, they're getting ready to sing the song that we've all been waiting to hear them sing, Hands Across America. My mistake. It's getting a little confusing here. It's America the Beautiful.
Thank you, America, you did it.
Well, there you have it. Absolutely incredible sight here in Lower Manhattan.
Now let's go to work.
Ships in the harbor are blowing their horns. Thousands of people. They've unjoined their hands now. They're mingling. Everyone seems excited and quite happy. Lots of smiles, lots of laughter here in New York. A perfect ending to the Hands Across America event. Now we'll go to the other end of the country, to Los Angeles, and Bob Fuss and Bob Brill.
Ed, it's really a pretty emotional scene here, too. People are coming off the line, but everybody's smiling. It really was a rather astounding event. People standing and holding hands, swaying, and singing these songs. Let's go now to Vicki Barker at the White House.
Thanks. John Watkins earlier talked about ingenious ways that gaps in the line were being filled. Well, here at the White House, I saw two children filling a very small gap with a teddy bear. The figures standing in front of the White House, President Reagan, Mrs. Reagan, and many, many children were dwarfed by the tall columns of the north portico of the White House where they were standing. It was, what can I say, an awesome sight stretching along the White House driveway and out over across the Washington Mall. All right, back to Dennis Daly.
Vicki, Hands Across America, long awaited. It was on March 28th that the song was premiered. Many people thought that we could not put it all together. We, in our own way here, I guess it's been telephone lines across America, covering this major event that the organizers said would be the biggest one-day, one-time thing in the history of the world. We'd like to thank in New York City, Don Rollins, Ed Cairns, and Chet Rhodes, UPI Radio's Bob Fuss, and Bob Brill in Long Beach, outside of Los Angeles, Vicki Barker at the White House. This is Dennis Daly. This has been a special report, Hands Across America, coming to you live from the UPI Radio Network.
Stations UPI Radio Washington with a somewhat delayed, but for a good reason, 310 feed, Eastern Time, of course. It consists of cuts 106 through 121.
UPI Radio Network Washington, Dennis Daly here, preparing to voice another update on the Hands Across America. This broadcast follows the firing tone, 15 seconds from Mark. We'll give you a 10-second cue, then no audio on the line. The broadcast 10 from Mark. Hands Across America. I'm Dennis Daly reporting on the UPI Radio Network. Well, they did it. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people forming what they could of a human chain across the country to raise money for America's hungry and homeless. Let's go first to UPI Radio's Bob Fuss, standing by in Long Beach, California.
Dennis, there's still very much a party atmosphere here at the Queen Mary at Long Beach as the people who stood at the Pacific end of the line for 15 minutes, singing, swaying, holding hands, part of an extraordinary event to raise money for the hungry. A local family who lives in the Long Beach shelter was at the very end of the line, a couple holding their 5 young children, symbolizing what the line was all about. Also present, a lot of celebrities, Whoopi Goldberg, Ben Vereen, Dudley Moore, and Raquel Welch. My colleague Bob Brill asked her what she thought the line was all about.
It's about hunger and homelessness and poverty within this country, and I think it's important to focus on that here as well as other places in the world.
There are still thousands of people milling around here and some very happy organizers for Hands Across America who say they've had a terrific success today. Now let's go to Don Rollins in New York.
Here in New York, they're still singing, they are still holding hands, they are still swaying. They are determined they're not going home, not for a while. It's a very beautiful, cool summer day in New York. There are boats in the harbor, the Statue of Liberty, Ellis Island in the background here at the Battery. People are singing. You can hear them in the background. It's going to be a long day here. They're not going home anytime soon. The air of celebration is is still here, and they want to savor every moment of it. We have our share of celebrities. We have politicians, but it's the everyday people who are celebrating right now from the Battery in New York City. Dennis?
Thank you, Don Rollins. It would have taken about 5.5 million people to cover a line without a break across America. There were, though, some planned gaps, particularly in the desert area. George Tanner in Phoenix told us earlier the temperature approaching 100, but gaps there and in other parts of the country bridged symbolically, if not exactly, by Hands Across America. Hands Across America, a special report. I'm Dennis Daly on the UPI Radio Network.
Station UPI Radio Washington. Coming up, a 4.5-minute hourly newscast anchored by John Watkins. It'll come your way 15 seconds from the start of the tone.
Everybody hold hands. Balloons by the hundreds are being released here. Just a few minutes ago, we had a fireboat shooting streams of water in New York Harbor.
Well, they did it. Americans reached out and touched their neighbors from coast to coast to help feed our hungry and house our homeless. UPI Radio News, I'm John Watkins. From New York to Washington to Chicago to Phoenix to Long Beach, California, 4,125 miles worth of people, a human chain. An estimated 4 million people holding hands after paying at least $10 to participate in the Hands Across America. Today's effort is expected to raise at least $50 million to feed the hungry and house the homeless. Today's line started in the shadow of the Statue of Liberty at Battery Park. The first person in line was a 6-year-old girl and her mother, Jean Sherwood. They used to live in a shelter.
It's very terrible living in there. You know, you always have to constantly watching your kids.
The line came down the East Coast, through the security gates at the White House, up the circular driveway, and underneath the North Portico, where the first family joined the line. UPI Radio's Vicki Barker is at the White House.
President Reagan, Mrs. Reagan holding hands with some children. I see Maureen Reagan standing in front of the White House, also holding hands with children. There's a man in a wheelchair. They're all singing. On the other side of the White House gate, homeless activist Mitch Snyder had brought some of the homeless as well to join the line. Mr. Reagan and Mr. Snyder are not always on the same side of an issue. This one time they're at least holding hands symbolically.
The line headed south a bit, then turned west. It ended in Long Beach, California, where UPI Radio's Bob Fuss was standing by.
Here at the end of the line, the final people in line are Bill and Mary Jones and their 5 children. They are a family that's been in the family shelter for the homeless here in Long Beach. They're standing up on a mooring to which is attached a rope from the Queen Mary.
You're listening to UPI Radio News. On PBS this coming week, there'll be a special program about Vietnam veterans. UPI Radio's Ginny Casola tells us more about the show.
A moving television program in which Vietnam veterans recall their combat experiences and their return to the United States airs this week on public television stations. It's called A Program for Vietnam Veterans and was taped in Madison, Wisconsin by PBS station WTTW in Chicago. Michael Hirsch, himself a veteran, is the producer.
It's the first time I've ever produced a show with the help of a psychiatrist who basically told me that the most useful thing I could do is show people on television that America is ready to listen to what veterans have to say. And he referred me to somebody who happens to be in the show, and that person referred me to someone else, and they said, well, gee, you ought to call so-and-so around here.
Hirsch says according to the Veterans Administration, 500 to 900,000 veterans still need help adjusting. Ginny Casola, Chicago.
President Reagan this week faces a tough vote in the Senate. UPI Radio's Pi Chamberlain tells us Mr. Reagan still needs to line up enough votes to okay a sale of arms to Saudi Arabia.
The president only needs 34 votes, 1/3 of the Senate plus 1. That's what it takes to sustain a veto, in this case the veto of the resolution of disapproval of the sale. The administration expected to get 34 votes easily for a $350 million sale to the Saudis, but it found that it was way short. To make it more palatable, the most controversial weapons, the Stinger handheld anti-aircraft missiles, were removed. That still did not produce the votes. Senate leaders said that if the vote had not been delayed for 2 weeks, the president would have lost it in one of his most serious foreign policy setbacks in Congress to date. Pye Chamberlain, Capitol Hill.
Gary Scalio of Buffalo, New York, will learn not to complain when his mail is late. He was expecting a package from Canada. When he didn't get it on time, he complained, but police were tracing that package. They'd been tipped that Scalio was expecting 14 pounds of high-grade marijuana. Yakima Canutt is dead at the age of 89. You probably don't recognize his name and most likely wouldn't know his face. But you might know his work, though. He was a stuntman who doubled for John Wayne, and he's the one who choreographed that big chariot race in the movie Ben-Hur. Yelena Bonner will arrive back in Russia soon. Before leaving Boston last night, the Soviet dissident admitted that she was afraid to go back. Bonner's been in the U.S. for medical treatment. John Watkins, UPI Radio News.
This is the UPI Radio Network. Dennis Daly here, preparing to voice what will be the final half-hourly update of the day. There will be, of course, other information in the hourlies you can use. This broadcast follows the firing tone at 4:30. The broadcast begins 15 from Mark. We'll give you a 10-second cue, then silence on the line. 10 seconds, Mark. Across America, a special report on the UPI Radio Network. I'm Dennis Daly. Well, they did it. A lot of people did it. And it all began at Battery Park in New York City, where UPI Radio's Ed Cairns is standing by.
Well, thank you, Dennis. The event that took months of planning is over, but the feeling of exhilaration lingers on. As I wandered among the crowds of smiling people, all expressed great joy at having been a part of a marvelous experience. One lady seemed to sum it up when she said it was not only joyous, but extremely worthwhile.
Such an exciting thing. I must say it's something I've dreamed about since I'm a very little girl. I always wondered what it would be like if people all across the country could join hands from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. I never believed it would happen. When I heard it was happening, I said I must be part of it, and especially because it was for such a worthy cause. I think it's so important.
It's a beautiful day, and a good-sized crowd still remains in Battery Park. It's as though they are reluctant to have it in. This is Ed Cairns in New York, and now to Bob Fuss in Los Angeles.
Ed, there were lots of celebrities at the western end of the line, though a homeless family was at the very end. Nearby were such luminaries as Ben Vereen, Whoopi Goldberg, Raquel Welch, Dudley Moore, and Peter Strauss, who talked about what it was like to stand in line as the singing went on.
Well, it's one of those moments where your heart beats a little and you get nostalgic and you get teary-eyed and you celebrate and you're touched. And most of all, it's a particular American event. It's something so uniquely American about people grasping hands, waving flags, and reawakening their sense of being so proud to be that.
The people in line are all gone now. Sailboats have filled up the Long Beach harbor, and a rather extraordinary effort is over and considered by its organizers to be a smashing success. For another look at the line that crossed America, we'll go to Vicki Barker at the White House.
President and Mrs. Reagan held the hands of children of White House staffers and sang Hands Across America with occasional help from lyric sheets. Shirley Gardner and her daughter Kim Booth joined the line near the Washington Monument.
The line was solid and everybody was singing and had their hands up and swaying back and forth and crying and everything, and it was beautiful. It really was.
There were some gaps in the line. That was inevitable. On the White House grounds, two small children closed a very small gap with a teddy bear. Back to you, Dennis.
Thank you, Vicki. There might have been a gap of a different kind in a Major League ballpark, but they fixed that. That was in Pittsburgh. We have a report from John Duffy at Three Rivers Stadium.
A human chain came through Three Rivers Stadium during today's game between the Cincinnati Reds and Pittsburgh Pirates, with about 250 people holding hands for America's homeless and hungry inside the stadium during the contest. Prior to the game, 150 little leaguers joined hands with players and local celebrities across the outfield in a symbolic line. John Duffy, Pittsburgh.
There was an event of another type in the Midwest. You might have called it Umbrellas Across Indianapolis. The weather there threw a damper not only into today's fundraiser, but forced the Indy 500 into a second day. More on that from UPI Radio's Jenny Casola at the track.
It's been a day of waiting here at Indianapolis, Dennis. We actually don't know for sure if the Indy will they'll attempt to hold it today or try to postpone it till tomorrow. It was pouring rain this morning. Then the downpour let up long enough for the drivers to put on their suits and the track to be cleared. After an hour or more of sunshine, it started raining again. And as I said, it still has not been announced whether the race will be postponed until tomorrow, but at best, all there would be at this point today is a shortened Indy 500. Jenny Casola, Indianapolis.
Thank you, Jenny. And so the moment has come and gone. Millions of people from big cities and small riding the subway or maybe their tractor just to get there, to be part of a human chain, hopefully to contribute more than just their time, money. to wipe out hunger and homelessness in the United States. Special thanks to UPI Radio Network people across America, Bob Fuss and Bob Brill in Long Beach, Don Rollins, Ed Cairns, Chet Rhodes in New York City, Vicki Barker at the White House, and Ginny Casola in Indianapolis. Hands Across America, a series of special updates. I'm Dennis Daly reporting on the UPI Radio Network.
Seems like only yesterday, or maybe 100 years ago. The sounds of Hands Across America from the UPI Radio Network. I'm Dennis Daly.